Again, feel free to say hi if you're joining me live. We are just going to get started in a moment. Feel free to say hi in the comments. Okay. All right. Welcome to today's episode of Faith, Fitness, Joy. My name is Rochelle Renee. I am your host. And today we are talking about inner healing, what it is and why you should start with it. So let me just get this pulled up here. As always, if you're joining me live, thank you for joining me live. I'm always happy to have people hop on here with me doing this live. Also today, I'm super excited because I have some amazing giveaways for 3 lucky listeners. So you'll want to stick around and find out what those are, as well as how you can enter to win for the giveaways today. Let me just double check one thing because I'm not sure. Okay, wasn't sure the sound was on. So, all right, welcome again to episode 95. If you are not already, please make sure you like and subscribe and follow the podcast so you can catch every new episode. And if you're not already in the private Facebook group, it's also called Faith, Fitness, Joy. I would be more than thrilled to have you in that group. Get in there to get all the extras on all things health of the mind, body, and soul, which is what Faith, Fitness, Joy is all about. And last but not least, check out my free 30-day training program that I'm offering right now. It's worth over $1,000. You will get access to 30 days of workouts, and you'll have a choice between home workouts, gym workouts. You'll also get the nutrition plan and access to the Facebook group, as well as a free transformation session with me as part of that. So if you are looking to get started with your health and fitness journey, go ahead and grab that link. It's in my bio on all of my socials. So let's get started with today because we're talking about inner healing. And I get asked, a lot about what is inner healing and, kind of why is it important and how is it beneficial? A lot of people might hear about it a lot and maybe don't really know what it is. Or like me, maybe don't think that it's anything you really need to do. And that's another reason I wanted to talk about it today and just bring some awareness to it because it really is important. And I think there's kind of a connotation with the word healing or the concept of inner healing maybe that sort of maybe leads people to think that it doesn't apply to them or it's not important or that it's maybe more than it really is. So I wanted to kind of help you understand exactly what it is, give you some sense of the benefits of doing this work, and then also give you some tips for how you can get started with doing inner healing yourself. Because again, it is life-changing, absolutely life-changing. So what we're going to talk about today is first we'll get clear about what inner healing is. Second, we're going to talk about why inner healing is important and valuable and life-changing. And then 3, we'll talk about some tips to help you get started with your own inner healing journey. So backing up a little bit, kind of what is it and how did I sort of get into it for myself? As you may have heard me talk about on this podcast, if you've been listening to it for any amount of time, um, I've been in health and fitness for over 30 years, and I've sort of been on this lifelong kind of, I guess you could say, journey of my own health and fitness, but really trying to sort of heal myself. But I didn't understand that that's really what was going on for many years, probably most of this past 30-year journey. And in the last decade or so is really when I started what I would consider kind of where I'm at right now, and the sort of process I've been moving through this past decade that was really sort of, my divorce was sort of the catalyst of that whole process. And as I've talked about in the past, I thought that weight loss was going to be like the silver bullet. I thought everything came down to my weight. I had my sort of like my worth was all wrapped up in my weight. My self-image was wrapped up in my weight, and I was in a victim mentality for most of my life, but I didn't know that I was. I didn't, I guess I didn't really understand what that was. And so it was, I started, weight loss and fitness was kind of my entrance into this whole path that I've been on that's led me to transforming my own mindset and learning how to do that, as well as doing my own inner healing work, and really finally starting to overcome and shift and move past a lot of these things that I had been carrying and that were affecting me, that I was oblivious to the fact that they were affecting me, and I was oblivious to the way that they were affecting me. As I would venture to say, most, if not all of us are. Most people, I think, have something underneath or underlying within them that affects how they operate and just aren't aware of it. And a lot of the terms that get used or that are used, like healing or inner healing or shadow work and things like that, often carry connotations for people that lead them to sort of shrug it off or poo-poo it, or they just don't think maybe that it applies to them. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to talk a little bit about it. So as I mentioned, the doorway for me was my health and fitness. Like, again, I thought like if I lost weight, it would all magically get better, because I thought that was like what everything came down to. But then as I would lose weight, it didn't make a difference. And then I also started to realize, after a lot of things that happened to me in the past decade, that there was like this pattern that had emerged. And this particularly, for me, this was with regard to my relationships with men. So, I've shared in previous episodes about what happened with my divorce and how, basically I uncovered like this whole second life that my ex was living, and it was all around infidelity, and it was a very, it was a betrayal, and very difficult for me to move past. Fast forward a few years later, after our divorce, I started dating again. I had another relationship, and I thought things were a certain way. And then, I was pregnant with my youngest, and he took off and disappeared. And I, to this day, don't know, where he is. And so then I had to kind of work through that as best I could, but again, not understanding anything around the healing work or any of those types of things. And then another few years later, I kind of got back out there again, and also ended up getting my heart broken, and just really put me in a place that was extremely difficult for me to kind of come back from. And so in the process of trying to heal from this sort of series of events that had happened with each of these different relationships, it was always, the question I always went to initially was, like, why me? Like, what is wrong with me? I must be unlovable. It must be me, and of course, these old stories about how it had to do with my weight and the way I looked, and stuff like that, which in hindsight is just so ridiculous and shallow when you think about it. But that was my mindset and my paradigm at the time. And so Um, in this, with this last one in particular, that one really put me in a dark place, and I really had a hard time recovering from it. Because I think part of it was because of where I had gotten to before I met that person. I was in a really good place. I had lost a lot of weight. I had done a lot of work around my mindset, and I had really kind of transformed my mindset. And I was just on top of the world at the time that I met this person. And so when I was reflecting back, it was like, how could this have happened when I was where I was and who I had become? How did I attract this person? And then that question led me deeper. And so as I started to explore these questions, it started to take me down this path that led me to understanding that everything that happens to us, we attract it somehow. And it's some sort of a reflection of what's happening within us. Now, that alone was hard for me to swallow where I was at. But I was at a point at this time that I just wanted to know what the hell, I just wanted to know, why did these things keep happening to me? What was it inside of me, and how the heck could I get rid of it? How could I eliminate this thing that was whatever it was that was giving me these results with my relationships with men? But also, what I also found through that whole, basically exploring that question, was that it was all starting with my own relationship with myself. And so then over the past couple of years, I went deep into this journey of shadow work, inner healing, ascension, like spiritual awakening, all these different terms you may hear people talk about. They're all aspects of this same process that I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So that's kind of how I came to it, and a little bit about kind of like what the impetus was for me to really look into it. But it may look different for you. And one of the reasons I shared the story is because you may, have caught that the question, I was trying to understand, what was this pattern? Where was this pattern of things that I was seeing coming from? We all have some sort of pattern, whatever it is. It might be with regard to relationships with the opposite sex or same sex, or whatever whatever your relationship history or preference is. It might be with regard to jobs. It might be in relation to money. It might be in relation to how you feel about yourself. It might have to do with friendships, or all of the above, right? Like, we all have these things that are, what's the word? Like, apparent in our realities and in our lives that will repeat. And we just most of us, like, I know for me, this was true, we just keep going along, and we don't necessarily think anything of it. And a lot of us may end up finding ourselves in sort of this victim mentality around it, of like, it's always happening to me. And we may not ever really ask these questions that I was just mentioning that I was starting to work through. And so then you can kind of end up stuck in these cycles and these patterns. So when you start to do this work, you start to uncover that. You start to get at what's behind all that. And you start to uncover what is called your paradigm, your dominant thought paradigm, your mindset. And this is created over the course of our lives from all these different things that happen to us. It's sort of it's built from this, I guess you could think of it as a compilation or collection of our different life experiences, things that our parents exemplify to us, but also things they say and tell us, as well as other adults that are important in our lives, like teachers, friends, parents, friends, aunts, uncles, all of that, right? And other things that we pick up from relationships and interactions with friends, and other settings, be it, as we're going through school, growing up, moving into maybe college later, if that applies, or into the workforce, or whatever it is. And so as we move along through life, we develop this thought paradigm that is this framework through which we operate and move through our life. And it dictates, like, sort of how we see the world. And underneath that are some of these emotions, and well, really the emotions of the things that have happened or the feelings that we have ascribed to those things that have happened. And we kind of carry them around with ourselves, and we don't necessarily realize it. We don't realize the way that it affects us and the way that it like sort of governs us to operate in the world. And so, and a lot of that again is because we're oblivious to it. And this is why one of the reasons I've come to understand this is why the Bible is so emphatic about things like forgiveness. It's emphatic about not being in shame, not holding on to guilt, not holding on to anger, not holding on to some of these heavy negative emotions, which many of us do. And again, we don't realize it because for the most part, we're unaware of what's happening. So let's get into kind of the main topics for today, and like diving into like, what is inner healing? What does that mean? It's really just the process of healing. It's the process of healing either past trauma, past hurts, or other various events and circumstances or experiences that you have had in your life, that for which you were not emotionally equipped to process at the time that they occurred. So a lot of times, again, and myself included, I used to shrug off the concept of this kind of work because I didn't think I had experienced trauma, right? That word just had a connotation to me that I didn't think applied to me, and come to find out, I actually have a pretty high score of past trauma. That, you know, again, I was just oblivious to because of how I was perceiving the term or what I thought it meant. And it's really just things that happened to us that we're not emotionally equipped to handle or process at the time, or that we just maybe avoid processing those emotions or feelings, and then we end up holding on to them and storing them, or it has to do with how we react to a certain situation. You know, a lot of people are probably really familiar with the process of grief, the cycle of grief, you know, where it starts with denial, and then you move into anger, and then I think it's like, I forget all the steps now. Bargaining, I think, is one of them, and then like eventually you get to acceptance. But there's all kinds of emotions that we move through when these things happen. You know, when you lose someone that you love, you might find yourself feeling guilty, you'll feel anger, you move through all these different emotions, and they can be very intense, especially depends on how the person passed away. You know, people I've lost that have been more unexpected, like when my best friend passed away about 3 years ago, unexpectedly. It was a very different series of emotions and feelings, and the intensity of those emotions and feelings in comparison to, say, when my father passed away, and he had been terminally ill for some time. So the circumstances were different. It's not to say that one loss was lesser than the other. It's just the different emotions and the intensity with which I felt those emotions was a little bit different in each case. But different things came up. And as a result of how you kind of move through those events or circumstances when they happen, it's going to affect like maybe where you carry it or how you carry it, which will eventually start to make itself known through how you move through the world and how you respond to things in the world. So inner healing is really this process of kind of uncovering that, and really starting with becoming aware of what these things are and how they're affecting you. So that you can start to really do the work around starting to shift it and transform it. So that leads me to the second thing, why you should start inner healing. Again, first you have to kind of look at the fact that most of us probably have room to do this. And there's benefit for everyone to move through this work, if you're willing to do it and you're open to do it. You may think you're fine and you don't need to do this. I know that was the case for me for a long time. In fact, I was so used to convincing myself that I was okay all the time that I was actually quite out of touch with my own, you know, feelings and emotions, and how things were affecting me, and how my internal things were affecting me day to day. So it was almost like indifference or numbness, and it's actually called alexithymia, where you're pretty convinced that you're fine, but you're really not. And different things start to happen in your body, and in your thinking and your emotions that start to try to signal to you that you're not okay and that you might need to, look at some things. So I would say, if you live in this world, you probably have inner healing work that you can do and that you can benefit from, and there's no shame in it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just part of being a human being, and living in this world. But doing the work will absolutely change your life, and it will transform you for the better. I would even argue that each of us has a responsibility to do our inner healing work because it's going to help improve the whole world. When you think about the ripple effect that each of us have on each other, um, and just how different things would be if people were more aware of what's behind some of the things that are these repeating patterns in their behaviors and in their lives. So that's one aspect, but the other thing is it's going to completely transform you from the inside out, and that will start to change your whole life, because again, the outer reality, including how people respond to us or how we perceive people responding to us, is all a reflection of what's happening in our inner reality, in our internal. So when you start to change that, your whole outer reality will start to change as well for the better. You will start to feel better. You will start to, you'll even start to look different over time. I've been doing this for several years now, and I've been really moving through it deeply in the last 2 years. And I am absolutely not the same person I was 2 years ago. So when I think back on around this time 2 years ago, I was just beginning the process of moving from my lifelong home in California out here to where I am in Montana. And I'm not the same person at all that I was when I started that. And that it just so happens that move coincided with the start of a lot of my own shadow work and my own inner healing work. And in that time, I've become a completely different person. And there's a lot of things about the version of me that I was in that couple years back, that it's almost like it's unrecognizable. And I don't say that like it's a bad thing. I mean, I'm grateful for that version of me and all that she got me through and helped me move through. But it's just different from where I am now. And I'm starting to step into a version of myself that I've kind of always wanted to be in the sense of how I'm starting to feel about life and about myself, and all of that, just from doing this work, and continuing to stay the course and move through it. So all that said, let's get into some tips for how you can get started with this. And I'm just going to move through kind of like the steps at a high level. It's too much to cover in this episode. But I do have some tools for you as well. And I also have another previous podcast episode that I did. It's episode number 14, and it's called The 7 Steps for Healing Emotional Triggers. So if you want more in-depth help around how to move through this, then I would recommend checking that episode out. And I also have this growth and healing journal that I've published. It's available on Amazon, and this is actually one of the things that I'm doing a giveaway for today. So 2 lucky listeners will be winning a copy of this. So it's basically a workbook. I don't know, workbook's the right word, but it's more of a journal. And it has kind of all of the things within it that you would need to start kind of working through this process. So one of those things is the emotion wheel. And if you look this up online, there's a lot of different versions of this. This is just like a free, kind of like a copyright free version that I found, that I included as a reference for you to use as you're moving through the workbook. And then there's different prompts in here. So each of the pages, it's like a 2-page spread. So if you're looking at this on the YouTube channel or the live, you see the interior here. But it's a 2-page spread, and it has different questions for you to ask yourself that mirror this process I'm going to walk through briefly today. And again, if you want the more in-depth version of that process, check out 7 Steps for Healing Emotional Triggers, which is episode 14 of this podcast. Um, so in order to really start with this work and to start to do your inner healing and make progress with it, the first thing you have to do is to become aware um, that you have work to do. That there's something maybe that needs to be, that your body may be calling you to address or look at. And the way that your body might do this is through emotions. It might even be doing this through physical things. Like you might be, maybe you're constantly throwing your neck out. You have all this tension up in your neck, and it's like you barely turn your head, and you've got that stiff neck going on. Maybe you're experiencing lower back pain a lot. Maybe you have other aches and pains. Maybe you have lots of stomach issues a lot of the time, things like that. These are all things that start in our minds, whether we realize it or not. And it's like your body's way of trying to tell you that there's something you're holding on to that is trying to be released. Your body is really always communicating with you. And this is kind of how it does it. So the other way that your body will try to do this is through your emotions and your mind, right? So start to pay attention to how you react to things. What's your kind of go-to reaction a lot of the times? What's your kind of go-to mood or emotional state, if you will? Like how are you generally feeling day to day? And then looking at the patterns in your life, looking at patterns in your relationships. Do you have like this line behind you of relationships where people have stabbed you in the back, or people have cheated on you or betrayed you? I mean, that's my line of things that I have behind me. Maybe you continuously find yourself in similar situations in jobs where you always have like this certain dynamic with your coworkers that is kind of like always bothering you or unpleasant or whatever, right? Like there's all kinds of different ways that this can be evident in your reality. And so just start to look at that and start to ask yourself, what could this be showing me? What is it inside me that this is reflecting? Because again, most of our experience is our perception of things as opposed to like how they may objectively be, if that makes sense. It's kind of like they're like I think it was Rene Descartes that said, I think, therefore I am. And it's this whole concept of like it's more of a philosophical thing around like if I'm not looking at this thing, is it really there, kind of an idea. But it's taking it deeper. It's how we perceive things, and that perception is created or born of this inner paradigm that we have, our dominant thought paradigm, which, as I mentioned earlier, is created from this sort of collection of things that has happened to us over the course of our life, or that we have seen exemplified in other people as we were growing up, that we then create meaning around and turn into our lens of understanding the world and operating in the world. So you have to first become aware of that in order to start to transform it. And again, try not to be judgmental of yourself and try to keep an open mind and try to be objective with this. There's no, shame in any of this. This is being human being. Like everybody has some kind of collection of stuff like this to move through that affects how we look at the world. And the beauty is we have the power to change it, but we have to become aware of it first. So the second thing is to learn to recognize what are the emotions that are sort of behind this. So here's another emotion wheel. So this is a great tool. The emotion wheel is a great tool for helping you do this part. Now, there's a number of different iterations of this. This is actually a Christian version. So for those of you that want to, that are Christian and, refer to the Bible a lot, this one actually I found this online somewhere, and I forget where, so apologies about that. But this one actually has different biblical verses that relate to the emotion. So if you want to like go deeper with it and look at that and meditate on that and pray for insight around that, that's a great way to do this as well. But basically the idea with any emotion wheel, and then there's the one in the journal I shared earlier. The basic idea here is that all these different emotions and feelings, like you can see how this one is bigger, and but all these different emotions and feelings can kind of boil down or tie to it's usually 6 to 7 core emotions, depending on the wheel. Like there's different versions of them, as I mentioned. So some of them will have 6 core emotions like this one does, and then others will have 7 like the one in the book. But the idea is when you start to kind of sit down and you're starting to recognize that there's an emotion related to this trigger. So let's say they always take me to traffic whenever I talk about this. So let's say you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off, and maybe you get mad about it. Maybe you just get irritated or whatever. So you might want to think about starting to look at, when else do I feel like this? What other things make me feel this way? What is it about this emotion or this situation that's bringing this emotion about? So it might start with being irritated, and then you follow the emotion wheel and it'll take you to whatever core emotion it is. It could be other things, like when people interrupt you. Maybe you have no reaction to that. Maybe you have a reaction to it. And if you're having a reaction to it, start to dig into, why do I have a reaction to it? Like, what is it that it's really feeling? Like maybe it's just more of a general feeling of nobody listening to you, or not feeling heard in general, or so, these kinds of things. So that's kind of the next thing you want to start to do, is to look at, recognizing the emotion first, and then next is to try to trace it back and start to get at, what do you think the root of that might be? So in the case of the interruption, maybe it's that you really don't feel heard. So then you want to try to go back to, when did that start? Like, when did I start feeling like I wasn't being heard? And maybe it was something when you were a kid. I don't know, maybe there was an incident and you were trying to tell an adult that something was happening, and they kind of brushed you off, or told you they didn't have time or something like that, and that led you to this feeling of, nobody listens to me and I'm not heard, right? So it's kind of like, you want to kind of get at that to start to figure out, like, where is this really coming from? And these different patterns and reactions that you have consistently day to day are the things that are kind of giving you those clues to that. And then next, after that, you want to start to look at, what kind of paradigm do I have? Like, what is my dominant thought paradigm? And so your repetitive behaviors and your repetitive actions are really kind of your big clues to this. So, my dominant paradigm for a long time was like always being stressed out, always in hustle, always feeling like I didn't have enough time. Everything was working against me. I couldn't win. Everything was difficult. It was like the universe was conspiring to make my whole life difficult. Like, this was kind of like the way I was thinking day to day, the shit I was telling myself day to day. And then you can imagine kind of like how I was feeling, and what was my perception was, not necessarily rosy all the time as a result of that. But I had to do all of these steps I'm talking through here, to kind of really understand that's what it was, so that I could start to shift it and change it. And so then the next step from there is to start rewriting the script, to start looking at, how can I start to transform this? How can I change this? Is this ultimately true, is a great question to ask yourself. So is it ultimately true that the universe is singling you out and making things more difficult for you on purpose? Probably not. Is it ultimately true that life has to be hard? Probably not. Is it ultimately true that you cannot succeed? No, right? So you start to write these things down that you say to yourself, that you catch yourself saying to yourself, and you start to change them and rewrite them into something that feels better, feels more like what you want to feel like. Because most of us don't want to feel like crap all the time. We don't want to feel like the world's against us, but we do, because we're not aware of what's really going on deeper within, and that we have the ability to change it. And then the last piece of this is to really focus on practicing forgiveness and allowing yourself to release a lot of these feelings. But in order to do that, part of this is to also allow yourself to feel them. And a lot of us actually do the opposite. We really work hard to not feel them. I've done this a fair clip of my adult life. I tried to self-medicate with things like wine and trying to numb things out, or just not feeling as stressed. I thought, I believed that, like, oh, if I was drinking some wine in the evening, it was helping me calm down. Little did I know it was making my anxiety way worse, and it was just exacerbating a lot of the things I was experiencing. But it's a very individual kind of process, and you have to figure out for you what it is, and getting to some of the core emotions and sources of these things. So what's going to happen with this is eventually you will start to identify the situations that have happened in your life and the people involved in them that led you to having this paradigm or this feeling or whatever. And so that might, well, I'd be surprised if it didn't at some point lead to your parents, which is not to say that it's about, calling up mom or dad and getting all mad at them about whatever. It's more about, understanding the source of it, and choosing to forgive them for however that affected you. The other thing that's going to come up, in addition to other people, because you'll be doing this for other people involved as well. Obviously, it won't just be your parents, your grandparents, other adults, friends, exes, all of that, right? But there's also going to be a point where you're going to realize you need to forgive yourself as well. You need to forgive yourself for however you internalized these things, whatever you made these things mean about you. And choosing to forgive. And there's some more tools in this book, in this journal that I'm giving away 2 of today. And that's also available on Amazon. So I'll include the link to this in the comments and in the episode description if you want to check it out. But there's also some prayer suggestions in here to help with how to do that. Again, as I've moved through this journey myself, I've come to understand, and being on the other side of it now and experiencing the benefit within, and how it's changed me and my life, by choosing to truly sit with the feelings, and really let them go and really forgive and release all of the crud that comes with all these different things that have happened to me or that people have done that have led me to internalize and mean different things about me over the course of my life. Come to understand that's why God, and why the Bible is so emphatic about forgiveness, and not holding on to shame, not holding on to guilt. I mean, if you really read through the Bible, especially in the New Testament and Jesus, Yeshua's words, this is all very consistent with what he exemplified and what he guides us to do. And the reason for that is because we only hurt ourselves, and then we ultimately hurt other people, without meaning to, often without meaning to, because these things we hold end up governing how we operate and how we look at the world, and what we do to ourselves and how we hurt ourselves. And they can also separate us from God and from Yeshua, because it's this free will thing. It's kind of the concept of choosing either the devil or God, to simplify it and boil it down to those 2 things. These heavier negative emotions are only going to lead you to a certain destination that most of us probably don't want. And I'm not saying that means hell. It's not about the religious part of it. It's about how it's affecting you physically, emotionally, and mentally, versus putting it down. That's why, it's that verse is coming to mind about my yoke is light. The verse about, many verses where God tells us to lay things at his feet. This is what he's talking about. It's like putting down that anger towards whoever or towards yourself, putting down that grief, and any of these other heavy emotions, because what does holding on to it do for you? It's only making things harder for you. It's only making the pain greater, as opposed to sitting with it for this temporary time to really allow yourself to process and release it and move forward. And then it's like this weight is lifted from you. And I guess the other thing, which I usually always say with this is, you know, do this with God. I understand not everybody is necessarily religious. This isn't even about a specific religion. Personally, I believe in God, and Yeshua, and I have moved through this by, basically meditating and praying with them, as well as my own spirit team and angels. That's how I've moved through it. But I would really encourage that as well, because it's going to help with deepening that connection with God and deepening that connection to yourself, and really just helping you reconnect with who you really are, which is not these emotions. All of these heavy emotions that so many of us carry are not us, and they're not even from God. They're from being in this reality, and what we attach meaning to about that. Your true self, as given to you by God, is one of love and peace and beauty. And I think that's why the Bible is so emphatic about doing this work, and relying on God and seeking God to help us with this work. So that's what I have for you today. I also have a coaching program that I have developed that's specifically designed around this. It's you can opt into a 6-week or a 12-week package. It is called Radiance: Discover the Beauty Within. I'm going to be talking about it a little bit more later today in my private group if you want to check that out at 2 p.m. Or you can just simply reach out to me via direct message, and just say hey, or just comment Radiance in the message, and we can chat a little bit more about that if that's something that you're seeking some guidance and help with. And then last but not least, so as I mentioned, one of the giveaways I have, or two of the giveaways, I'm giving away 2 of my growth and healing journals for free. So if you want to leave a purple heart in the comments in the next 24 hours, I will randomly select a winner for 2 of the journals. And then I'm also giving away a free 30-minute healing and activation session with me. So that is the third prize that I'm offering today. So to enter into that, leave a purple heart in the comments, either on the YouTube video or here on the Facebook Live. And I will randomly select a winner for each of those 3 giveaways, for each of those free items. So I will announce that person I'll announce them on Friday morning, so everyone has a chance to check out the episode, and leave your comment just comment with a purple heart emoji to enter into that. So I am excited to see your comments and who all opts into entering into that, and to giving away these awesome prizes to 3 lucky winners. So as always, thank you for tuning in today. And you can always catch other episodes on Podbean or any other podcast platform. Remember to like and subscribe if you're not already. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in with me today. Always wonderful to see you here. So I will see you on Monday for our next episode of Faith, Fitness, Joy.